The governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, welcomed Super Falcons trio Asisat, Oshoala, Rasheedat Ajibade, and Monday Gift at the Lagos House in Marina, acknowledging the awe-inspiring achievements of the Nigerian women's football team at the ongoing 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. During the meeting, Sanwo-Olu hailed Asisat Oshoala as a true Agba baller and celebrated her groundbreaking performance on the global stage. Asisat carved her name in history during Nigeria's triumphant 3-2 victory against Australia in the FIFA Women's World Cup. Entering the game as a substitute in the 63rd minute at Brisbane Stadium, Oshoala left an indelible mark by scoring Nigeria's third goal in the 72nd minute. Her crucial contribution not only secured her team's win, but also etched her name as the first Nigerian player, male or female, to score in 3 different FIFA World Cup tournaments. Governor Sanwo-Olu expressed his admiration, stating, "I still have the picture we took during the COVID visit, and truly, you are Agba baller." The governor's warm acknowledgement underscores Oshoala's outstanding achievements and her role in elevating Nigerian football on the international stage. The governor reaffirmed Lagos State's commitment to empowering and supporting female athletes, and he expressed optimism about the future of women's football in Nigeria. It is so clear to everyone to see now that Nigeria is a powerhouse when it comes to women's football. The English team, the US team, the Australians, the French team, the Spanish team, they might all be regarded as the big dogs in women's football, but Nigeria is very well respected. And I suppose I have to ask this: is Asisat the most, is she the very best female footballer we've ever produced in this country now?
I really don't think so. I mean, there was a time of Mercy Akide. There was a time of the former, their names keep me right now. I don't think Asisat is the best we've produced ever, like you put it. She could be the best currently. She could be the best of her generation, but definitely not the best ever. And just like you read, coincidentally, I wrote a story about this. So permit me to just read a short quote from what the governor said regarding what you're trying to talk about. The Super Falcons' incredible run at the FIFA Women's World Cup has ignited a new era of enthusiasm for women's football in Nigeria. The achievement on and off the field has brought our nation truly remarkable accolades. Now, what I'm trying to bring out from this quote is the governor himself alluded to the fact that the enthusiasm for women's football has returned. He has acknowledged the fact that the nation is now put in reckoning. Fortunately enough, before this show, I was discussing with friends, and we were talking about the fact that even some of us that are football enthusiasts that really didn't follow women's football before, we started following women's football at this World Cup. And that was one of the achievements the Super Falcons got: reckoning, admiration. I mean, some of the Super Falcons ladies were the talk of the town. Michelle Alozie, Tony Payne, and the rest of it, including Ashley Prompty, who also alluded that the African football, not just Nigeria now, has moved from anywhere below face to more tactical awareness. So generally, there are positives to bring out. And it's also good. It's not just Sanwo-Olu. I think Adeleke for Osun State, he hosted some Super Falcons player. Hope Uzodinma in Imo State hosted some Super Falcons player. The First Lady hosted the Super Falcons players as well as the D Tigress. So it's good that these dignitaries are recognizing the ladies, but it shouldn't just stop with facial value. It shouldn't not stop with eye service. We need to see something tangible and relative come out from all of this.
I believe it's a Yoruba saying that goes that a failure of a child has no father, but a successful one has many. In this instance right now, the Nigerian women footballers are enjoying a lot of admiration, a lot of people want to throw support behind them. Can this be translated into the kind of development in the women's game that could perhaps allow us to, in the next World Cup, to go further than the stage we ended up getting knocked out in, which was the last 16.
Okay, so probably this will be our first disagreement on this show. Just permit me to fault a little of your adage. Now, I may misunderstand your intentions, but from what you're trying to say, the dignitaries are, lobbying the girls because they were seemingly successful at the World Cup. I don't think they were successful at the World Cup. You crashed out of the round of 16 against an England side that were one man down. You failed to score penalty in the penalty shootout. You only scored once or twice or so. You only scored in one game out of 4 games, drew the rest in a stalemate. So technically, we're in that successful at the World Cup. What I see the dignitaries doing, what I see our government officials doing, is leveraging on the momentum the women's football has garnered. It started from when we heard that each player will get 30K going into the World Cup at all. Then it later got to the point where we got out of the group stage and it became 60K per player. So all these things built the talk, the conversations that, money is beginning to flow in women's football, at least in some context. Now, again, it's really not about aligning with success. It's about leveraging on momentum. And if you leverage on momentum, it's 2 things. It can lead you further, or you could drop halfway if you're not careful. So I feel while the dignitaries are doing this, what the NFF should do, just like Ibrahim Gusau said to Michelle Obi on a radio show, that the NFF are trying to look for how to pay the outstanding bills and blah, 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 what not. All these things need to be resolved now that the ovation is loud. If we let this momentum slide and we fall back to when women's football had no reckoning in the country, how we will get back to where we are now? Because the next World Cup is in 4 years' time. What will the ladies be doing before 4 years' time? Is it the same AFCON we've always won? We've won the AFCON 9 times. That's not progression. We know that. We need to do something different on the world stage. We need to do something different in the Olympics. So those are the things that would now show if truly they're experiencing progression.
With the kind of success that the ladies have had on the continent in the women's AFCON, should Nigeria be pushing and leading the charge at FIFA to promote a kind of more holistic opportunity for the women to test themselves at a higher level, more regularly, maybe every year? Therefore, maybe the game can develop, our game that is, can develop to match the levels of the Brits, the English women, the Australian women.
Muka, let's chat. Do you really think that the reason why we were not successful at the World Cup was because the girls were not experienced? Do you really think that? Because it's a rhetorical question, first of all. I'll allow you to. But the reason I'm asking is we have talent. Look at those girls. Ashley Pumpty for Leicester City, Alozie for Houston Dash. Even the defenders, Dimei and Oshoala, they are good with their clubs. Asisat Oshoala is literally one of the best. You can't mention Barcelona Femini. After you mention Alexia Putellas, you will definitely mention Asisat Oshoala. It's the same way you mentioned the Italian Serie A, you will definitely mention Victor Osimhen. But when all these players come, we had about 4 Nigerian players who were literally the best of their clubs last season. Ian Nacho was the best of Leicester City. Ademola Lookman was the best of Atalanta, based on awards, right? Iwobi was the best in Everton. Chukwueze ran the La Liga racket, Villarreal. Now he's in AC Milan. Why didn't these guys replicate it with the national team? We struggled against Sierra Leone. Imagine leading 3 goals and conceding 2 goals at the nick of time. Struggled against Guinea-Bissau at home. So I think it's not just about exposure.
Yeah. But I think that when it comes to talent, when it comes to skill, and when it comes to exposure, there's something to be said about the kind of structure that is in place to develop a winning mentality. When you talk about, let's look at the English men's team, for example. For decades, they've gone into tournament after tournament after tournament. The golden generation of Lampard, Scholes, Gerrard in midfield, David Beckham, so much talent in the English side, but they could not get over the hump. The Spanish team was better. They just were. The Germans were better. They just were. Even the Italian men were for a long time, the French side were for a long time much better than the English men. And yet, the Englishmen, when they went away back to their clubs, they were such leading players. They were considered some of the best in the world, not just because of the hype of the English media, but because the stats backed them up, because the style of play that they were given in their respective clubs showed that they were top tier players. So ultimately, there was a block at the national side and they just couldn't get through it. Now, in the last Euros, England managed to get all the way to the finals. They didn't win it, but they did do something that they hadn't done in a long time. They proved that they could be considered a top 2 team in a competition, in a major tournament. And the next World Cup, they will hope that they can go as far as the semifinals, as far as maybe even the actual finals. And if they could get over that hump, if the experience of having missed out on the Euros final is anything that they can learn from, then they very well could win the tournament. My point is, there's a value that exposure does bring that our ladies currently are not benefiting from, because the likes of Germany, the likes of Australia, the likes of England, they play each other in friendlies consistently. They play each other in the Euros consistently. And that top tier level of talent and skill and performance they are used to as a group, as national sides, which something that Nigerians women aren't quite at a level yet, because like you said, we've won the women's AFCON 9 times. It just doesn't seem to be progressing us any further than we currently are. But we need to move on, because
sorry, can I just react some seconds to that?
All right.
I feel like when we talk about exposure, we mostly allude it to the national team and the federation of the country. If we look holistically, when did Sarina Wigman take over the English women's national team? 2021. Where was the English women's national team before then? Look at the English women's national team under Sarina Wigman. They are Euros champion. They've qualified. All the times you were mentioning about countries qualifying for tournaments, they didn't qualify out of merit. They played qualifying games to qualify for those tournaments. The reason why African teams or African countries aren't gaining so much credence is because they hardly qualify. It was in 2019 for the first time, or was it in the previous one before 2019, that we had 3 African teams for the first time in the FIFA World Cup. We usually had 2. In fact, from 1991 when the World Cup started to 1999, before we had Ghana join us, it was just Nigeria alone. Then we now started having Ghana join us, Cameroon joining us. Then in 2015 or so, we now had 3. Now we have 4 or so. Yes, we have 4. 3 of those entered the round of 16. So it starts from the countries improving their coefficient and qualifying for this competition. You can only make it out if you go in. You cannot win if you don't qualify.
All right. Exposure. I want to make one last point, and you could respond to it, but you have to be short. Exposure matters, even if we're talking about qualifying for tournaments. A lot, like I said before, these teams, these national sides, even if you look at the English women before Wigman came into the helm, the fact is, regardless of whether they were qualifying at the World Cup, qualifying for the Euros, it took a lot of time for these women, for these national sides, for these federations to build successful women's sides that could qualify with regularity. And when these sides were established, one of the first things they did was ensure that they played the very best, not just in competition, but also in friendlies. Now, we talk about exposure and whether that has an impact on whether these ladies can harness the kind of unity, the kind of performance level, and therefore raise their coefficients to go into tournaments, perform admirably, qualify, and go as far as possible. By the time these tournaments come around, the English women know almost every single player that could get potentially picked by the Australian side, by the Spanish side, by the Germans, because not just because they've played with these players in club competitions and they are friends, but because as a unit, as national sides, they've had experiences playing with them in friendly games that have shown that they can live up to it. Because, like you said before, the women's side in Nigeria used to be anywhere but left face. Now, the development of the technical and tactical side has improved greatly. And that did not just come about because we stuck around and played against only African women. I don't know if you understand my point.
I totally get you, and I will answer very briefly. The NWFL, the Nigerian Women Football League, was established in 1990. We've been playing domestic football in Nigeria when it comes to women since 1990, 33 years ago. The WSL, Women's Super League in England, came into existence in 2010, 13 years ago. Compare the WSL with the NWFL. NWFL is 33 years, the age of Jesus when he died. The WSL is just 13 years old. 13 years old today is not even regarded as a teenager yet. But look at the WSL and look at the NWFL. That is my argument about exposure. We make exposure look like you have to do it for a long period of time. It's not about doing it for a long period of time.
No.
It's about doing it well over time.
Okay. I think maybe
That's what I'm saying. It's about doing it well over time.
I think maybe you'll misunderstand what I mean by exposure because, okay, let's use children as examples. Once upon a time, in order to solve a mathematical equation, you used the abacus. And for the longest time, that was the best you could do in terms of a machinery that could help you calculate. But at a certain point, a generation came, and that generation had access to calculators. Fast forward down the line, another generation came about, and we had mobile phones, and on it, you had a calculator that goes around with you. But aside from that, the mobile phone has now developed into an actual computer. It is not just a piece of technology that snaps pictures, that text. It is a computer in a small frame. My point is now that the children the generation that got access to the mobile phones were further along the line of development than the generation that had only the calculator to use to calculate their equations. And just as they were further along in their development than the children, the generation that only had the abacus. Because each generation were further down the line. Each generation had access to knowledge faster than the previous generation. And that is why a lot of people say the younger generation is smarter than the older generation. I don't know about that. I would say that they know more about the world than the previous generation. But I think we need to move on. I just wanted to make that analogy so that we can wrap this up. Because as we talk about the English women's side, the English women have qualified for the World Cup finals for the first time as they spoiled co-host Australia's party on a historic evening. It is a lot to say about the English women that they've come this far in such a short time. And now, even though the women's side in the US have reached the World Cup and won it multiple times, this feels kind of out of the blue for the women, for the English women. Even though going into the competition, especially after winning the Euros, a lot of people believed they could do it. A lot of people had them down as favorites, and now they very well might do it. What do you make of how far Wigman has managed to get these girls right now? Gbenga, do I still have you? Gbenga, are you still on?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I think the
Yes, I
network
can
was
hear you.
funny at the point. Okay, so yes, I totally agree with what you're talking about. I think I get a more clearer perspective to your idea of exposure. But all I'm saying is, and the reason why I mentioned that longevity from the NWFL's perspective is not blaming the players now. It's saying what we have in the country as it stands, the potential we produce, the raw material at our disposal is enough for any right thinking federation to utilize for the better. Is enough for any world class coach to get to the final. I mean, look at what the Super Falcons did, even with an underdeveloped coach, if I can put it that way, a university level coach, right? We got to the round of 16. We played against tougher teams. In fact, all the teams we played against were better than us on the ranking. But we could have done better. Asisat Oshoala, like you rightly said, scored in a third World Cup, right? Our is it captain now? Or maybe this was our sixth World Cup. That's massive. Most of these players have been around for a while. Desara Oparanozie that came and took penalty to throw in. She's also a player with exposure. But I think the exposure should be shifted from the players to the backroom staff, to the administrators, to the federation. That is where we need more exposure. We need these guys to go to other federations and see what they are doing right, to see how they are creating a structure around. I can particularly mention how many teams had better players than the Super Falcons at this World Cup. But in the grand scheme of things, the Super Falcons players as a team can't stand toe to toe with the other teams. Not because they are not good enough, but because of their output. So the exposure, I get your point, but I think we are blaming the wrong set of people. That's just what I'm saying.